Hey there, so this is the NASA Dragonfly model that I made. It is FDM printable. This is what I call the Ultimate Edition. It's a 1/5 scale rendition of the model. It's comprised of over 200 parts, and I've laid it out on what I call these sample build plates, but in reality, I just lay them out like this so that I can number them and name them. So you can see it's a relatively complex model. And in this video, I would like to show how I create models in Blender. The entire model took over 100 hours to create, so instead I'd just like to show how I create one of the simpler components. So for example, this camera piece here. So let's get started. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I would like to create a cube here, and I want it to spawn at this object's origin. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure the object's selected and press Shift S, cursor to select it. So now when I do Shift A and make a cube, the object will spawn right at that 3D cursor's location. You can see 20 millimeters is pretty good, but I would like to make it a little larger. So I'm going to move my mouse over here and press S. We're going to scale it up a little bit. And then I'm going to use what is called gesture-based transforming. So I'm going to press S and then move my middle mouse button down and click it and in the direction of Z. And as you can see, it's constrained it. But this is, in this case, a little less precise. So there is an add-on that comes with Blender. It's called 3D Viewport Pie Menus. And I really like the set origin one because it's assigned to Control Alt X by default, and that's really the only one I use aside from Editor Switch, which I don't use that often. But this one's good because you can press Control Alt X and I do origin to bottom, and then Shift S selection or cursor. So now I'm going to press Tab and go into edit mode, press 3 for face selection, and GZ, constrain the movement in the Z axis, and then S to scale, something like that. And then I'm going to press Tab to get out of edit mode. Then I'm just going to move this over and I will select this object, press Control L so that we can link the materials. And now before I do any modeling operations in edit mode, I want to make sure that my object scale is uniform. As you can see here, it is. But if it isn't, then your operations that you perform in edit mode may not behave as you'd expect. So to make sure your scales are uniform, press Control A and apply the scale. So now let's go ahead and go into edit mode, select the top face. I'm going to press I to inset and then E to extrude, I to inset again, and then I'll press I to inset again because I'm creating the topology for this lip here. And then E to extrude downward. Now I'm going to press 3 for face selection, hold down Alt, left click. We're going to select that loop, that face loop. I'm going to press Alt E, extrude faces along normals. Now I would like to create this curve here. And this edge is kind of getting in the way. It would make it a little bit more complex to do that. So I'm going to get rid of that edge loop by just holding down Alt and left clicking. And it'll select the entire edge loop for me. X and dissolve faces. So just press X and go to dissolve faces. Now I'm going to press Control Alt left click and that will select this entire edge ring. So let's go and press Control B and this will allow me to do my beveling. So with beveling, I can use the middle mouse button to determine how many segments I have. But for now, this is acceptable. Once I left click, I now see the operator panel down here. I'm going to choose 16 segments, and this is acceptable. Let's go and go to the outside and do the same thing. Control Alt left click. I can press Z to toggle between wireframe and shaded mode, or wireframe and the last rendered mode you used. So I would like to press Control B again, and I'm going to use the middle mouse wheel to determine my segments, but I'm going to increase them this time. I'm going to go with 32, and the reason why is because this is on the outside and it should be a little bit more detailed. Let's do Control Alt left click as well to select that ring and press Shift R to repeat the last operation. But actually this inner one is going to be a lot smaller. So I'm going to press F9 to bring up the operator panel. I'm going to choose 16 segments and maybe 1 millimeter width. The reason why I chose half the amount of segments is because you want your model to be reasonably efficient. If you have too much detail, then it's inefficient. But if you have too little detail, you could see facets on your finalized print. So in this case, I chose 16 segments on this side and 32 here because I want the overall density to be roughly the same. All right, so now let's go and move on to the next piece. Now I do create all of my components from scratch. Normally I would just take one of these screws and duplicate them over if I'm creating another camera. But in this case, I'd like to show you how I create one of these screws. So let's select this edge and cursor to selected. Shift A, create a cylinder. We're going to have 8 segments. I'm going to do S.01, maybe S.1 again. There we go. So that's a pretty good size. Let's scale it down. Let's move it up a little bit. And you can see it does intersect the surface a little. This is fine because when we bring it into the slicer, these two components will be merged based on their normals. So this is valid. So what I'm going to do now is select this top face, GZ, move it down, do Control R to insert an edge loop. Select top face again, something like that. And now I'm going to make sure that I copy that material over. And before I go into edit mode, I'm just going to origin to geometry and then apply the scale. I'm going to isolate this with /, and I like to convert this to a subdivision surface. So I'm going to press, here's the modifiers here you see. I'm just going to press Control 3, and that's going to add a subdivision surface modifier at level 3. Now, I also want to make sure that these edges on the bottom are flat. So I'm going to go into edit mode, press 3 for face selection, select this bottom face, and Shift D 1, enter, and that's going to create creasing on all those edges on the bottom at 1. So that makes it flat. Let's go ahead and do / to toggle out of isolate selection, or what Blender calls local view, but other software calls it isolate selection. Now, we've got to think about topology. The reason why I chose 8 segments is because I'm going to be doing a Phillips head here. So let me select these two vertices and press J. And then over here, I can just press Shift R to repeat that operation. And then Shift R again. So what I'm going to do now is select these faces, I to inset, and then E to extrude. And then I'm going to select these faces, or these edges, I should say. And we're going to press S for scaling, and then Shift Z to constrain that scaling in the X and Y plane in global space so that we don't make the top here go up or down anymore. And now I'm going to press 3 for face selection, GZ, move that down a little bit. And you can see that's a rough idea of a Phillips screw. I may want to widen it a little bit, so I'm just going to hold down Alt and then Shift Alt to select these two loops, face loops. Now, the way you do a face loop in Blender, it's sensitive to where you make the selection. So if I hold down Alt here near this edge, it's going to select that loop. But if I hold down Alt here, it's going to select that loop. So I just press Alt and then Shift Alt to add to the selection. And now I'm going to press S, Shift Z to widen that screw a little bit. All right, so I'm just going to bring up wireframe. I'm going to move the cursor to the selected point there, which is the center of that edge. Shift D to duplicate, and then selection of cursor. Now I'd like to duplicate these and move them down here right on these edges. So I'm going to enable edge snapping, select both of these, Shift D, and then as I move down constrained in Y, I'm going to press Control. And if I go down here and press Z to toggle into wireframe, you can see that it is perfectly on that edge. So now you can see that this geometry is not realized yet. And so what we need to do is bake it down. So I'm going to select all these screws and apply the subdivision surface modifier, or in this case, actually apply all modifiers. So I press Control A, Visual Geometry to Mesh. And now I will select this object last, right click and join. Now, in order to check the integrity of the model to make sure it's manifold, I press Tab, I go into edit mode, I double tap A to make sure I deselect all, make sure there's no selection. And it got to be an edge selection as well. So I just press 2, select all by trait, non-manifold. You can see here there's no selection. So that means this is a very clean model and it's ready to print. However, we're not quite done yet. I would like to make this piece. So let's go and select this face, center the cursor on that selection, make a cube, scale it down, and then move it up a little bit. Maybe bring this down as well, scale it in. We could always bring it in a little bit more. And then I'm going to apply the scale because you can see the scale is not uniform. Apply the scale. Select this edge and this edge. And then Control B. Now normally clamp override will be off by default and it will produce this type of geometry which is invalid. So make sure you turn on clamp overlap. And I think 16 segments on each side is fine. I'm going to select these two and press Shift R. Now there's also some vertices that are occupying the same location. So in order to get rid of those, I'm going to press A to select all, M to bring up the Merge Vertices menu, and choose By Distance. And you can see at the bottom it says Remove 4 Vertices. So let's go ahead and make sure this inherits this material. Not that that's required, but it just looks a little nicer. Now there are many ways to duplicate this. Over here, I'm going to show one way. So I'm just going to move the cursor here and then go into edit mode on this object and make sure we're just doing 3D cursor for transform pivot point, 3D cursor. I'm going to press Shift D S and then gesture downward. And now that I've constrained it in Y, I'm going to type -1, enter. And you can also, of course, change the values after the fact. Now, the issue is the normals here have been flipped. So I'm going to press A to select all, Shift N to recalculate normals to the outside. Now you can see the scale is uniform, but even if the scale wasn't uniform here, once I select these two objects and then select this one last and choose join, it's going to inherit the scale of the main object because now it's just one object. All right, so now let's go and create this piece right here. It's relatively simple. All right, so before I do anything more, I would like to make sure that I am in transform pivot point of bounding box center. And what I'm going to do is with this face selected, I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate the face, P to separate the selection, go into here, and now we're going to just scale that a little bit, go into edit mode, 3 for face selection, A to select the face, of course, select all. I'm going to press E to extrude up a little bit, and then I'm going to get out and choose apply scale with Control A. And now it's time to make one of these nubs. So let's go ahead and isolate this selection. Let's create a cube and bring it down. Now if I press N to bring up this panel, I like to make my nubs around 1.2 millimeters overall. And so because it's centered on this face, it's going to be protruding from the surface 0.6 millimeters. So let's go and give it some details. I'm going to add an edge loop, and I'm just going to move this like this, select these two, and do that. And now I'm going to go into here and Control Alt, select that edge ring. We're going to deselect that one, and now press Control B to bevel. And 12 segments or even 8 is more than acceptable here. And now I'm going to inherit the material here with link materials, Shift D to duplicate that, select this object, right click join or Control J. So now you can see that we have two copies. This new copy, I'm going to go into edit mode with face selection, select this face loop, press Alt S 0.2 because I want to have 0.2 millimeter gap around here. And now I'm going to press GZ 0.45 to move it upward. So now if you can see, this is going to be a cutout for the next object. So let's press / to unisolate that object. Let's go into here. Now we've got this selection isolated. And we are ready to prepare this to be a Boolean object. So I'm going to go into the object properties. This is what I personally like to do. Change it to wireframe. And I believe the Bool Tools add-on does it automatically, but I still like to do it myself. And then what I'm going to do is make sure that my print Boolean cutouts is selectable. And I'm going to press M to move this object to the print Boolean cutout selection. And then Shift select the object that's going to be Booleaned out. I'm going to press Control P to parent object, keep transform. And then we're going to do a brush Boolean. Now the brush Boolean means the object will retain the Boolean modifier. And now if I press / to get out of that isolated view, we can move this object away. And I'm just going to center the pivot. But everything is ready to go. And now I'm going to export this to an STL, scene unit, selection only, export STL. You can see the file is exported successfully. Inside Bamboo Studio here, which is a slicer I use, I'm going to press Control I, import test STL. I'm going to say yes. And then with my current print settings, I'm slicing the plate. As you can see, this model is valid. It is manifold. There's no warnings on it. And it would take 44 minutes and 22 seconds to print. It would use about 1.6 grams of filament. So I would just, at this point, go to File, Export, Export G-code, and give it a file name and copy it to a memory card and get it printing. So I hope this video gave some insight into the process of creating a relatively simple model for 3D printing purposes in Blender. Thanks for watching.